people who are doing these things to make a living. And it doesn't matter that it's spiritual or saying all these mantras, they're doing it for making a living. And they're not really doing it because they have love for Krishna. And and it says, carrying out Krishna's order, the boys immediately went to the wives. They found the wives sitting inside there. They were very beautifully decorated with ornaments. After offering them all respectful obeisances, the boys said, "Dear mothers, please accept our humble obeisances and hear our statement. May we inform you that Lord Krishna and Balarama are nearby. They have come here with their cows. And you may know also that we have come here under their instructions. All of us are very hungry. Therefore we have come to you with some food. Please give us something to eat for Krishna, Balaram, and ourselves." Well, that's a pretty clear statement. Immediately upon hearing this, the wives of the Brahmanas became anxious for Krishna and Balaram. These reactions were spontaneous. It's because they had love for the Lord. They're hearing the Lord's hungry. And Balaram was hungry. They did not have to be convinced of the importance of Krishna. That's an important statement. They didn't have to be convinced because they had complete faith. They didn't even know that they are the Supreme Personality of God. They didn't really know that. They just had this absolute love for the Krishna and Balaram. So it says that their reactions were spontaneous. They did not have to be convinced of the importance of Krishna and Balaram. In other words, they don't need to know that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of God, that Balaram is also the Supreme Personality of God. They just had complete love for them, and that's what counted. Immediately upon hearing their names, they became very anxious to see them. Being advanced by thinking of Krishna constantly, they were performing the greatest form of mystic meditation. In other words, being advanced by thinking of Krishna constantly, they were performing the greatest form of mystic meditation. We should really write that down and put that on a board somewhere, That's what, being advanced by thinking of Krishna consciously, they were performing the greatest form of mystic meditation. All the wives became very busily engaged in filling up different pots and nice foodstuff. Due to the performance of the sacrifice, the various food was all very powerful. After collecting the feast, they prepared to go to Krishna, their most lovable object, exactly in the way rivers go to the sea. Uninhibited, flows. For a long time, the wives had been anxious to see Krishna. However, when they were preparing to leave home to go see Krishna, their husbands, fathers, sons, and relatives asked them not to go. The wives did not. When a devotee is called by the attraction of Krishna, statement, when a devotee is called by the attraction of Krishna, he does not care for bodily ties. The women entered the forest of Vrindavan on the bank of the Yamuna, which was verdant and very green, with vegetation and newly grown vines and flowers. Within that forest was Krishna and Balarama, engaged in tending the cows along with their very affectionate boyfriends. So you see, Krishna, he doesn't have a suit and tie and a desk and a secretary and tutor and all these things. There he has some kind of food, and he's in the forest. He's taking the cows up there so they can get some fresh grass, and it's like a very rural and type of existence. Right? It's nothing like highly sophisticated. Like, the downtown Seattle, high rises, high rises.
So, English speakers was working in the morning?
Big men and women working.
No, they weren't. Income were not. And were you able to live stream in the morning?
Yeah, but worse than that. Very, very low audio.
We're in the forest.
I think there is a
The
sound
trees,
effects that
the bees, the birds, it's pristine. Pristine environment. And the word is there, and it's enchanting. Everyone is like enchanted by it. Even the trees and the birds, and all the residents of the forest are enchanted by it. Well, now it says, due to the performance of the sacrifice, the various food is also very palatable. Oh, see, here's the point about that. Prasadam should never be very, let's say, very bitter, or it should not be very, very full of spices, right? Not too much, but you can have some spice, but not too much. It shouldn't be very hot. Like if you put a little bit of food in your mouth and start on fire, you call fire. Some people cook like that, and it's so hot that they have a fire engine and come and put the fire out. Yeah. So this is a problem, It doesn't mean, you're cooking for a shot and you gotta make it hot and put a lot of chilies. It's all new fashion and even ignorance when it's too hot. Much too hot. It's not good for your health either. Okay, so it says, so their husbands and hearts, sons, and everybody, they don't want to cowherd women to go. But the wives did not. When a devotee is called by the attraction of Krishna, he does not care for bodily time. The women entered the forest of Vrindavan on the bank of the Yamuna, which was burdened with vegetation and newly grown vines and flowers. Within that forest, they saw Krishna and Bhagavatam engaged in tending the cows, along with their very effective
it's gone.
You have to put this in a certain context. If today Krishna and Bhagavatam were present and they were spending most of their time with cows and in a forest-like situation, would they be attractive to mundane people? Well, obviously, they're very beautiful, very attractive. But what's attractive?
Don't do that.
This is open uh, uh, parks and so forth, with a lot of greenery. It's like now we're coming into spring, and everyone's like getting relief from winter and enjoying the fact that they can walk and smell the flowers and smell the greenery, and it's like a new, let's say, in, enthusiasm for life. Spring is definitely a rebirth of nature, and it opens our heart to and enjoying, hiking or seeing, flowers and so forth. It's very, very encouraging. Okay, so him, their husbands, fathers, sons, and relatives asked them not to go, but the wives did not comply. When a devotee is called by attraction of Krishna, he does not care for bodily ties. The women entered the forest of Vrindavana on the bank of the Yamuna, which was verdant, meaning green, with vegetation and newly grown vines and flowers. Within that forest, they saw Krishna and Balaram engaged in tending the cows along with their very affectionate boyfriends. Now, this is something that we will eventually experience, uh, because this is a vision of the spiritual world. That's You see Krishna and Balaram engaged in tending the cows along with their very affectionate boyfriends. That's something that hopefully we will all see when we become transcendentally engaged in devotional service. The Brahmana's wives saw Krishna putting on a garment glittering like gold. He wore a nice garland of forest flowers and a peacock feather on his head. He was also painted with the minerals found in Vrindavan, and he looked exactly like a dancing actor on a theatrical stage. They saw him keeping one hand on the shoulder of his friend, and in his other hand, he was holding a lotus flower. His ears were decorated with lilies, which are beautiful flowers. He wore marks of tilaka, and he was smiling charmingly. With their very eyes, the wives of the Brahmanas saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead, of whom they had heard so much, who was so dear to them, and in whom their minds were always absorbed. Well, you see, this is the normal way of becoming Krishna conscious. First, you hear about Krishna and you hear about Prabhupada, pure devotee, and you engage in service, uh, and eventually you will see, uh, the spiritual master. You will see Krishna as, in his deity form. Uh, it all happens because of hearing, not seeing exactly. It's the hearing that builds your enthusiasm to see. Just like if you get these, when you're in an airplane, they always have these very high glossy magazines. Right? Pick it up and it says, "Go to Montreal and be happy." And there's all these pictures, happy people in Montreal, in these bars, and now when you get to Montreal, there's advertisement: "Go to Seattle and be happy." And again, there you see the bars and you see the all the bottles of liquor and wine and people smiling and happy. So uh, this is all Maya. That's what Maya is. One time there was a man. Uh, he saw this advertisement, go to hell and be happy. And then there was a really nice picture. It looked like Hawaii, or Oahu. So he bought a ticket and he had to get into this elevator that goes down. So he gets in the elevator, it goes down, and as soon as he gets out of the elevator, these two demons grab him and start beating him up. He said, "Hey, what's going on here? I thought this was like heaven." He said that was the advertisement, and this is the reality. And that's what usually happens in life. You get pummeled by a lot of publicity, and but when you actually get to what you want or where you want to go, it's not what you actually expected, unfortunately. And sometimes it's the complete opposite of what you expected. But the publicity was really good, really, really good. So we see this nowadays. It's in the papers you'll see uh, people are going to places where they can there's like uh, the ocean and nice hotels and nice food and all that stuff, but they end up dead because there are some dangerous people there. There are some places where people go for vacations where they're very, very dangerous people, you know, and they end up dead. It happens a lot, especially you go to Mexico, to be happy, and you get either uh, mugged and they take your money away from you. They can beat you up. They can take you as a prisoner and ransom you off, or they can kill you. There's some really dangerous people in Mexico. There's dangerous people in America also, but uh, it's more dangerous when you're like 1,000 miles away from home and you don't have any relatives, you don't have any friends. You might not even be able to speak the language. It's very, very dangerous. And so nothing like home sweet home, where you feel safe. Okay, so with their very eyes, the wives of the Brahmanas saw the supreme personality of Godhead, of whom they had heard so much, who was so dear to them, and in whom their minds were always absorbed. Now they saw him eye to eye. In other words, that was my experience also. I joined Krishna consciousness without seeing Prabhupada. And I didn't see him until I was in the movement for about 2 years. But every day I was talking about Prabhupada and chanting his name and, going to programs and so forth, and saying Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. But I had never saw him. And when I saw him, I was like overwhelmed, completely overwhelmed. He looked so majestic and so wonderful. And then when he spoke, it was like a dream come true. So it was more than I expected. Let's put it like that. So, with their very eyes, the wives of the Brahmanas saw the supreme personality of Godhead, of whom they had heard so much, who was so dear to them, and in whom their minds were always absorbed. Now they saw him eye to eye, face to face, and Krishna entered within their hearts through their eyes. Did fantastic statements. Fantastic statements. They began to embrace Krishna to their heart's content with their eyes. Okay? And the distress of separation was mitigated immediately. They were just like great sages who, by their advancement of knowledge, merged into the existence of the Supreme. As the super soul living in everyone's heart, Lord Krishna could understand their minds. They had come to him despite all the protests of their relatives, fathers, husbands, brothers, and all the duties of household affairs. They came just to see him who was theirs life and soul. They were actually following Krishna's instruction in the Bhagavad Gita. One should surrender to him giving up all varieties of occupational and religious duties. The wives of the Brahmanas actually carried out the instruction of the Bhagavad Gita in total. He therefore began to speak to them, smiling and very magnificent. Well, here's something that we should really focus on. They came just to see him, who was their life and soul. They had not seen him before. They only had heard about Krishna. Just like, Rukmini, she did not see Krishna. She only heard about him. And she decided, this is the person I want to marry. So this is the same thing. Hearing about a person or hearing about a place, like, there can be so much, uh, so much information about some place you can go for a vacation. And, you keep reading it, and all of a sudden you think, I got to go there. So, in the same way, uh, you can hear about Krishna and you can uh, begin to desire in a very extreme and, let's say, profound way to always see Krishna. So then, you go to the temple, you can see Krishna's beautiful form. He's there in his form as a deity. And then you can also become a pujari and dress Krishna and bathe Krishna every day and take care of him, feed Krishna. So that way you become spiritually, let's say, excited to do that on a daily basis. And if you don't do it, you don't feel right. And if you do it, you feel very happy. And the rest of the day, goes nicely because you had that morning program where you were seeing Krishna, touching Krishna, feeding Krishna, hearing about Krishna, talking about Krishna, and so forth. So then it says, they began to embrace Krishna to their heart's content, and the distress of separation was mitigated immediately. They were just like great sages who, by their advancement of knowledge, merged into the existence of the Supreme. As the super soul living in everyone's heart, Krishna could understand their minds. They had come to him despite all the protests of their relatives, fathers, husbands, brothers, and the duties of household affairs. They came just to see him, who was their life and soul. They were actually following Krishna's instruction in the Bhagavad Gita. One should surrender to him, giving up all varieties of occupational and religious duties. The wives of the Brahmanas actually carried out the instruction of Bhagavad Gita in total. He therefore began to speak to them, smiling, very magnificent. It should be noted in this connection that when Krishna entered into the wives' hearts and when they embraced him and felt the transcendental bliss of being merged with him, well, this is not Mayavadi merging, right? You still keep your identity. So for Mayavadi reasons, oh, you see, oh, merged, merged, merged. They go crazy over the word merged. What's that? Yeah, one with the Lord. He said, "Oh, now I've become God." I was with this one friend of mine once, long, long time ago, and he was a communist, and we were in downtown uh, somewhere in France, in Paris, and we heard an explosion, you know, and as soon as he heard it, he said, "The revolution has started." That- because because that's what is in his mind. He was a communist, and he wants to overthrow the government and establish communism. So for him, I mean, for me, I heard the explosion. It didn't mean much to me, but for him, it was a big moment in life. He thought it was the beginning of the revolution. So it's amazing. It's amazing how people are in a state of Maya. You know, uh, it's just unbelievable. The consciousness that some people can have. Okay, they came just to see him who was their life and soul. They were actually following Krishna's instruction in the Bhagavad Gita. One should surrender to him, giving up all varieties of occupational and religious duties. The wives of the Brahmanas actually carried out the instruction of the Bhagavad Gita in total. He therefore began to speak to them, smiling, very magnificent. Well, I mean, I guess there is definitely uh, let's say, uh, a necessity to what? To carry out uh, the instruction of the Bhagavad Gita in total. Not, I like this part, I don't like that part. I like the part about prasadam, I don't like the part about, chanting the rounds. So here it says, in total, he therefore began to speak to them after they were completely surrendered to him. He therefore began to speak to them, smiling very magnificently. It should be noted in this connection that when Krishna entered into the wives' hearts and when they embraced him and felt the transcendental bliss of being merged with him, the Supreme Lord did not lose his identity, nor did the individual wives lose theirs. The individuality of both the Lord and the wives remained, yet they felt oneness in existence. When a lover submits to his lover without any pinch of personal consideration, that is called oneness. Okay, so now we have a definition of what oneness means in spiritual life. It's not the Mayavadi, uh, let's say, version of oneness. They think that you become God, you merge into God, therefore you became God. You keep your identity, Krishna keeps his identity and individuality, but you're one in purpose. In other words, there's no, uh, let's say, different point of view for a devotee than the point of view of Krishna. Therefore, there's oneness there. Whatever Krishna wants, that's what you want. That's oneness. Like in a family, if your son is like 10 years old and you tell him to do something, he does it. He's one with you, right? But when he gets older, he says, I don't want to. And all of a sudden, you're not, the oneness is broken now. So, how would you feel if your child says, Daddy, Mommy, I will never leave you. I will always be here to help you. When you get older, I mean, you would really appreciate it, right? That's oneness. So, uh, oneness is not Mayavadi oneness. Oneness is one in purpose or one in, let's say, uh, having the same culture. That's oneness, having the same culture or having the same desires. Okay, so the wives of the Brahmanas carry out the instruction of the Bhagavad Gita in total. He therefore began to speak to them. Krishna began to speak to them, smiling very magnificently. It should be noted in this connection that when Krishna entered into the wives' hearts, and when they embraced him and felt the transcendental bliss of being merged with him, the Supreme Lord did not lose his identity, nor did the individual wives lose theirs. The individuality of both the Lord and the wives remained, yet they felt oneness in existence. Yeah, because whatever Krishna wanted, the wives satisfied him, and they wanted the same thing only to satisfy him. They had no personal preference or agenda. When a person has a personal agenda, they can't have oneness. They can try and convince other people to cooperate with them, but it doesn't mean that there's going to be oneness because everybody has different opinions. So what happens when you hear Bhagavad Gita and you hear, like this type of information, you suddenly become one with Krishna. You want to serve him. You want to be a good devotee. You want to chant. You want to do so many things, engage in devotional service. You're no longer interested in the parties and the vacations and this thing and that thing. And you become attached to the deity of the Lord. You see. There are these two devotees, they're brothers. I think one of them died. Yeah. Prabhupada told them a long time ago, you always stay in Mayapur, don't leave, and take care of the deities. And they've done that for the last 50, 55 years. Just stayed in Mayapur and followed Prabhupada's instruction. You know, they've never, I mean, they might leave for just a few days or something like that. But their whole life is taking care of the deities in Mayapur. So, because they received a direct instruction from Srila Prabhupada to do that. Okay, so now it says, it should be noted in this connection that when Krishna entered into the wives' hearts and when they embraced him and felt the transcendental bliss of being merged with him, the Supreme Lord Krishna did not lose his identity, nor did the individual wives lose theirs. The individuality of both the Lord and the wives remained, yet they felt oneness in existence. When a lover submits to his lover without any pinch of personal consideration, that is called oneness. Okay, when a lover submits to his lover without any pinch of personal consideration, that is called oneness. The Lord Chaitanya has taught us this feeling of oneness in the Shikshastika. Krishna may act freely, doing whatever he likes, but the devotee should always be in oneness or in agreement with his desires. So that is what is understood by oneness. Just like even in a marriage, the husband and wife are uh, compatible, then whatever the husband wants, the wife wants also. When it turns, and whatever the husband wants, the wife never wants. So now you have a big problem. There's no oneness anymore. So how can you have oneness? Well, you both become devotees, husband and wife, and then you'll have oneness. Because if the husband pleases Krishna, the wife is happy. If the wife pleases Krishna, the husband is happy because the goal is to please Krishna. Right? Now there's oneness. No, it's not oneness that we are one. And you like to play golf, I like to play golf. You want to. That's not oneness. But if you have love for Krishna, whether the wife pleases Krishna or the husband pleases Krishna, they're happy because their goal is to please Krishna. That's how you have oneness. You have oneness through Krishna. Okay, so Krishna may act freely, do whatever he likes, but the devotee should always be in oneness or in agreement with his or Krishna's desires. That oneness was exhibited by the wives of the Brahmanas in their love for Krishna. Sometimes people get married thinking they know the person that you're getting married to. And after some times they realize this person is completely different than me. They have complete different, things that they're interested in, and I'm not at all interested in those things, and they get shocked by it, because they couldn't see that earlier in the relationship, but it comes out later on that this person is completely different than me, and it's a shocking experience, and eventually, oftentimes it leads to a divorce. Krishna welcomed them with the following words: "My dear wives of the Brahmanas, you are all very fortunate and welcomed here. Please let me know, what can I do for you? You're coming here neglecting all the restrictions and hindrances of relatives, fathers, brothers, and husbands, in order to see me, is completely befitting. One who does this actually knows his self interest, because rendering transcendental loving service to me without motive or restriction is actually auspicious for the living entities. Oh, that's a big statement. Big statement. Lord Krishna here confirms that the highest perfectional stage of the conditioned soul is surrender to him. One must give up all other responsibilities. This complete surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the most auspicious path for the conditioned soul, because the Supreme Lord is the supreme objective of love. Everyone is loving Krishna ultimately, but realization is according to the advancement of his or her knowledge. One comes to understand that his self is the spirit soul, and the spirit soul is nothing but a part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, the Supreme Lord is the ultimate goal of love, and thus one should surrender unto him. This surrender is considered auspicious for the conditioned soul. Our life, property, and home, wife, children, house, country, society, and all paraphernalia, which are very dear to us, are expansions of the Supreme Lord. He is the central object of love because he gives us all bliss, expanding himself in so many ways according to our different situations, namely bodily, mental, or spiritual. Now, Krishna continues, my dear wives of the Brahmins, Krishna said, you can now return to your homes. Engage yourselves in sacrificial activities and be engaged in the service of your husbands and household affairs, so that your husbands will be pleased with you, and the sacrifice which they have begun will be properly executed. After all, your husbands are householders, and without your help, how can they execute their prescribed duties? Well, in other words, what he's saying is that all these yagyas, they should be performed by husband and wife. It shouldn't just be performed by the husband. The wives of the Brahmins replied, dear Lord, this sort of instruction does not fit you. Your eternal promise is that you will always protect your devotees, and now you must fulfill this promise. Anyone who comes and surrenders unto you never goes back to the conditioned life of material existence. We expect that you will now fulfill your promise. We have surrendered unto your lotus feet, which are covered by the tulsi leaves. So we have no more desire to return to the company of our so-called relatives, friends, and society, and give up the shelter of your lotus feet. And what shall we do returning home? Our husbands, brothers, fathers, sons, mothers, and our friends do not expect to see us because we have already left them all. Therefore, we have no shelter to return to. Please, therefore, do not ask us to return home, but arrange for our stay under your lotus feet so that we can eternally live under your protection. Wow, these are pretty strong ladies. They're really speaking with a lot of potency. The Supreme Personality of Godhead replied, my dear wives, rest assured that your husbands will not neglect you on your return, nor will your brothers, sons, or fathers refuse to accept you. Because you are my pure devotees, not only your relatives, but also people in general, as well as the demigods, will be satisfied with you. That's a big statement. Because you are my pure devotees, not only your relatives, but also people in general, as well as the demigods, will be satisfied with you. Krishna is situated as the super soul in everyone's heart. So if someone becomes a pure devotee of Lord Krishna, he immediately becomes pleasing to everyone. The pure devotee of Lord Krishna is never inimical to anyone. Never, in other words, they never get upset or angry or abusive or anything like that. A sane person cannot be an enemy of a pure devotee. Transcendental love for me does not depend upon bodily connection. Krishna said further, but anyone whose mind is always absorbed in me will surely very soon come to me for my eternal association. Okay, so it's late now, right?
Krishna's temple service.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll stop there. And we'll continue. This hasn't finished yet. So we'll continue
Kitchen lo service.
again tomorrow. But this is all new.
Kitchen.
Any questions? One of these days we'll have a retreat where this can go on for like, hours and hours and hours. Retreat in a nice place with a lot of cows and greenery. You gotta have the cows. It's always a wonderful thing when, you're in a place where the cows are right next to you almost. And you can pet them, and then you're also hearing and chanting. And the cows are there, and they're grazing on the grass. It's just a beautiful setting, you know. Haribol, Ogres Prabhupada. We will continue tomorrow. Haribol.
Questions?
No questions. Okay. Thank you for coming, and always chant Hare Krishna and be happy. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
Ram, Hare Hare.
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Yeah, all of you will experience when you get older, you can chant all day long without any interruption. And so that's one benefit of getting older, you know. But there's some downsides things also, but this overlaps that. It's just, it's the best thing in the world. You can chant all day long without any interruption. Haribol. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Maharaj, I think about the Brahmanas, maybe I didn't hear it right, but later you said something different. What do you mean by, you said something that I think the Brahmanas' wives did not know about the Lord, but they had a lot of love for the Lord.
Okay. Well,
is it coming from the previous life?
No, this is. See, if you go, let's say you go back to Godhead, you don't know that Krishna is God. You simply love him, right? Because if you think he's God, then you cannot be intimate with him. You'd be afraid to be close to him because he's God. You wouldn't be able to worship him and please him in the way that you want to. So that's why the gopis, they simply love Krishna. They don't really care he's God. If they consider him to be God, they can't come close to him. So that's a little. I don't think it's hard to understand. Like, if you love your father, now let's say your father is like president of the United States, right? But you love your father, so when you see your father, you go up and you hug him. Now, if you think your father is the president of the United States, it's hard to go and hug him because he's a big guy, But if you consider him as your father, then you out of love, you want to hug your father, right? So it's something like that. And the gopis, they don't care that Krishna is God.
They just love him. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Haribol. Okay, we'll continue. 24 hours. Haribol, 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 Haribol. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Ram Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.